Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to the show. I'm really excited today to talk to Danica Connors. She's a practicing herbalist and a Wiccan. We're going to talk to her about some of the practices that she has, some of the origins of where the Wiccan practice comes from, and she's also a tarot card reader, so we're going to learn a bit about tarot. I personally learned a lot from this conversation and walked away feeling very, very energized, and hope that you do too. See you on the other side. All right, welcome back to our show. Today, sitting across from me is a practicing Wiccan. She's been practicing for 30 plus years, also been tarot reading for 30 plus years, which is probably the longest standing practitioner of this practice that I've physically met. I've read about and I've seen and I've read articles of, but the first person that I've really interacted with is you. And then also, you're an herbalist and specializing in Lyme disease and different types of tick-borne illnesses. So sitting across from me today is Danica Connors. Thank you so much for being on the show, Danica.
Oh, my pleasure, Adam.
I love it. So when I was going over the way that I wanted to introduce you, I asked the question of whether it's pronounced like if it's a Wicca practice or a Wiccan practice, and you told me Wiccan, but then also had a little diatribe afterwards. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Sure.
Jump right into it.
Why not? Just lean in.
Exactly.
It's interesting because within Wicca and witchcraft, there are many definitions because there is kind of a limitless way for people within these practices to describe themselves. So, at least in the way I know of it and the way I was trained, and believe me, everybody's got different ways of approaching this, but being a Wiccan means, yes, there is the connection to earth-based spirituality. You are connected to the cycles of this planet, and you usually celebrate them through what we call the Sabbats and the Esbats. We have different celebrations that are a combination of Germanic tradition, Roman tradition, Celtic tradition that has become kind of the wheel of the year. But also being a practicing Wiccan means you do step into the concept of divinity and that you are exploring that, whether that is God, goddess, which is usually the most common, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. But divinity is something that you step into. Being a witch is something different. You do not have to believe in the divine.
Okay.
You don't.
All right.
Or the god or the goddess.
Right. Like the higher power of sorts.
Yeah. Witchcraft tends to, you don't have to have, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not necessarily ceremony, but it's more about technique when it comes to witchcraft. Witchcraft deals with spell work. Okay. Witchcraft deals with how you work with the energetics around you through different physical formats that create intention, that create results. Okay. So in reality, you can be a witch and not a Wiccan. And you can be a Wiccan and not a witch.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
So there are different, and that's super basic. Believe me, we get into pantheism and polytheism and all of these things that kind of roll into different ways that people explore. For me, when people kind of ask me, I tend to roll into the concept. I'm very much a hedge witch in most ways, which is I'm an herbalist.
Okay.
I'm an herbalist. So the green world, hedge witches are those who kind of work spiritually and physically with both the energetics of the plant world and also the chemical constituents of the plant world and what that does, both medically and spiritually, or health-wise and spiritual-wise, how that all rolls for people. But I was brought up in a coven that was Wiccan-based.
Okay.
I was initiated in that way, and I do very much follow the seasons and celebrate them and lead ritual for people in that way. I very much deal with the goddess and the god. That is what works for me.
Okay.
So if I could, I don't know, somehow find some word that puts all of those things into one, maybe I'd land land there, but it tends to end up in a long conversation.
Right. Yeah. So hedge witch, is that a practicing Wiccan like yourself that uses herbalism as part of the practice? Is that
For me it is.
for
Yeah.
you? Okay.
Yeah.
That's
For
okay.
me, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you also said a word I wasn't familiar with, espits.
Oh, the Espots. So
Espots,
there are
okay.
Sabbats and Espots.
Yeah.
And so, or the lesser Sabbats and the greater Sabbats and these kind of things. So the big circle of the wheel of the year, which combines solar aspects and lunar Celtic aspects. So you have, say, what people are very familiar with, summer solstice,
Gotcha.
winter solstice, autumn equinox, spring equinox. Those
Yeah.
are very solar points, Germanic and Roman kind of oriented. And then we have the ones that are in between those points,
Okay.
which are more Celtic.
All right.
And they are more lunar because for the ancient Celts, the day started at dusk, not at dawn. So their things are in the in-betweens. So we have things like Imbolc and Beltane and Lernissa and Samhain. And they are
Samhain,
the
okay.
ones in between. So those are our big, big Sabbats.
Okay.
Right? And the Espots are the lunar cycles, our full moon, our new moon, and how we celebrate those.
Oh wow.
So we have our, the Sabbats and the Espots.
So you've already taught me something I didn't know. That's fantastic. I love this already. So I've been very, very familiar with the solstices,
Yeah.
and then I think that was, like you said, that's probably the most commonly used kind of esoteric phrase that we kind of generically hear. And then I think it was about maybe 10 years ago where I finally became aware of the equinoxes and the importance of the equinoxes, and then starting to celebrate those and rituals around those. And now I have the Espots.
Yes,
Ah.
you get your moon moments.
There you
Those are important too.
And we have a full moon coming up, I think, on this Friday. Yeah.
And it's a partial lunar eclipse, I believe.
Nice.
Yeah.
What are some of the rituals you have around moons?
To me that's when to me that's when very personal, intimate, and also say your inner circle, like in covens that I was trained in. You have the Sabbats are meant for everybody who's coming to celebrate and all that stuff.
Okay.
Those Espots are meant for the inner workings of those who are really committed to working on deeper work, because everybody how they have different ways of approaching their spirituality.
Right.
Some people go for the bigger aspects, and that's fine, and then there are those who want to dive deep,
The dirty work.
they want to get into that.
Yeah.
And that's when the moon work can be very, very powerful.
Okay.
So for me, full moon work is about working with what is coming to fruition, where your energy is going and where you want to put it. While the new moons or the dark moons for me are kind of what you're letting go of and what seed you're kind of resetting. So you work kind of energetically in that way. And there are those, for instance, who lunar eclipses, for some, I just had this conversation, interestingly enough, that don't work on lunar eclipses.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know, that potentially astrologically, because I'm not an astrologer, that's not my thing, but apparently sometimes in the astrological worlds, you're not supposed to do the work on that day, right?
Okay.
But for me, that's not the case. I've done some of my most powerful shadow work on eclipses.
Okay.
When your consciousness is shadowed by the lunar, your subconscious comes out to play. And if you want to do the work that is buried in those places, eclipses can be really powerful for that, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
For instance, we have one coming up in Taurus, right?
Okay.
That might be a time, Taurus can be about what we hold on materialistically in this world.
Okay.
Also, it's our bodies, a very physical part of our health and well-being in our bodies in that way. So you can do shadow work around what are you holding on to materialistically? And how much is that helping or not?
Right.
And how is it defining you? The other thing can be, what are the subconscious and shadow aspects that may be standing in the way of you healing yourself and your body?
Right.
Right? So those things can, that's how I've worked in that way in different aspects. That's how I find shadow work and eclipses to be super powerful.
Wow. And that's, I've just in the past probably 6 months started to do some shadow work on my own. And it's one of the hardest things I've done. I for all intents and purposes had a really great childhood, loving parents, things like that. So like the surface memories of childhood are great. We went to day camps and had brothers and we had a lot of fun and all this stuff. But the more I start to sit in my meditations and start to I feel comfortable with the human being that I currently am, which is a very bold statement for me. I haven't been able to feel that way in a long time, if ever, at least consciously. And through that comfort that I now have as my current human self, it gives me the space to go back and start to work on some of that past human self. And I'm starting to uncover a lot of some of the, the childhood traumas that I did have, and not in a traumatic, trauma resonates in our body in a very similar way, not non-dependent on the severity of trauma, right? Read the Body Keeps the Score, it talks a lot about that. So, sometimes when I think of trauma, I think of it being like having to be something dramatic, like a sexual trauma or an abusive trauma or something like that. But, the trauma in my life was I was an overweight kid until I was about a senior in high school. And there was a lot of trauma involved with that for me. Trauma eating, trauma from my brothers making fun of me for my weight, which I love them to death. And I know they didn't mean it then, but we were just fucking kids. And so there's a lot of that stuff that I'm just now getting to a point to unpack. And it is so difficult and so hard. It's nice now to know that there is a time to really focus on that practice and to maybe get some help from the moon, from the universe to help on that journey, because it's a tough journey.
Yeah, it really is. It's funny that you say something about those small, because I also work shamanically as
Okay.
well in many of the healing things that I do, and also within my practice. That's one of the things that, for me, Wicca and witchcraft and all of those things are not necessarily stagnant. They develop and they grow and they change for everybody, whether you're in a group, whether you're in, but there's also tradition, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Tradition holds a place, and it also, there's something about a comfort aspect of it. You walk in and you know the language, right? You
Yeah.
know the foundation, you know the language, but then you grow as a human being and things change. So the whole concept of those tiny traumas, I work with some of my clients in that way, and I give them this example. I remember as a kid, I had a blanket. I had my blankie that I loved more than life itself. And for me, one of my nervous tics is I would kind of curl the end of the blanket
Okay.
over and over and over again. And so eventually that blanket shredded gradually down. My mom would wash it, and then it would go gradually down, until it was pretty much the size of an envelope.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was down to practically nothing. And my mom couldn't wash it anymore without having it fall apart. So she lovingly replaced it.
Right.
And for me, that was, and it still is something that I work with, because it's a memory that it's an energy that locked in my system around betrayal by those you love.
Right.
It was a blanket.
Wow. Yeah.
There was no way she was doing anything to hurt me in any way.
Yeah.
But that blanket in my world was my safety and my calm point.
Yeah.
That was trauma for me.
Right.
So it had nothing to do with, I just got, I don't know, knock on wood, hit by a car. Or, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
But it's these tiny things that no matter what our bodies understand, our psyches understand, and that's where this moon work, this, especially in something like Taurus, if in your physical body, if you have the tools to do a ritual, whether it's shamanically, however you want to do it, to go in and have your body tell you what trauma is there, or what is hiding, or what is under there that may be causing imbalance in your own physical being. It's
Yeah.
a powerful thing to be able to do in these types of rituals. And that's what I love, is when you have the tools and the knowledge. What I love about witchcraft and Wicca is we were taught you got to be flexible and creative and on the fly. This is not about you have to go out and get a red candle on the third night of the whatever the heck it is. Do 12 turns to the left, sit down and meditate for 12 hours and fast, and then you're ready.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
How I was brought up in Wicca and witchcraft, it was whatever you've got in front of your face is always what you need, because the energy of all of this, they're just tools. They're just tools channeling your energy in order to create and manifest and connect. So to me, when people are like, I have to get a green candle, I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah, right. Totally. I love that.
In reality, no, you don't.
Yep.
You could just sit there and imagine a green candle. You can sit there and just create a flame in your mind. Like, this is not, there's so much more flexibility than you think.
Yeah.
But it also creates, to me, practitioners who are not dependent, who are creative.
Yes.
And that's important to me.
I echo that 100%. I just had a conversation with a woman that a friend of mine down in California, and she was coming up here to do Reiki training that we were doing. And so we talked to her beforehand. She was like, I don't know what to bring. Should I bring all my stones? I have 7 different decks. Did I bring all the things? And I need to have this. I need to have that. And I'm like, Mac, you are a spiritual human being, whether you have your shit or not, right? You do not need your stones, your tools, your malas, your crystals, all the things for you to be a spiritual human being. Right? And if anything, that makes you stronger because you know you don't have to lean on your tools. When COVID hit and we started doing distance Reiki, that was a big thing for me to get that message to myself of like, okay, so when I have somebody on my physical table, I have tuning forks, I have singing bowls, I have rattles, I have drums, I have chants I can do, all these things. But when I'm across the world from you, Zoom isn't a good platform for sound, right? I can't really play a sound bowl and have Zoom take that over to you and have that full effect, and that's going to limit a lot of what I can do. So I have to rely on my intuition, which is an atrophied muscle for me. And so when I started to rely on my intuition, my practice got stronger because I didn't have to rely on my tools. I was my tool. I was the divination tool, not all these other things. And that was such a beautiful realization to me, to be like, it's all in you. You don't need anything else. It's all you. You have the magic. You are the divining rod, right? It's the you, that the human being that you are.
Yeah. It's interesting. So, in Wicca and witchcraft, a lot of people, think about their tools, right? And whether you read about it or you're trained in it or however it goes, you sit there and there are certain tools that represent certain elements on your altar. But each one is, in all reality, channeling that element within you. But what's interesting about a tool is if you use it enough over time, it's an automatic trigger.
Okay.
And that can be very helpful for a lot of people.
Right.
That you look at the chalice on your altar and all of a sudden the water in your body responds because you've done it over and over and over. So I'm not saying that a physical tool is like, hey, let's just chuck it. I think there's a balance of knowing that where your energy has a part to play,
right,
and where the energy of the physical manifestation of the symbol that's actually triggering something within you and the universe gets its muscle gets worked until it responds.
Okay.
So,
beautiful.
that's kind of that part too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Like a talisman of some sort, that can trigger that feeling, but that talisman doesn't need to be you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
There was something you mentioned when you were talking about the blanket story. I'm reading a book right now called How to Do the Work. I think the author is Dr. Nicole Lapuse or Lapon. I can't remember exactly her last name. Fantastic book. And there's a chapter I'm just getting through called on reparenting, like reparenting ourselves, right? Finding a better bedtime regime for ourselves. Basically like your parents did the best they could. Now it's up to you. Here's how to reparent yourself into being a more responsible, like ritualistic human being. And she was talking about how parents inadvertently cause trauma in their child's life. Hence your blanket, right? So I have 2 kids, 17 and 12-year-old, both girls. And when I had them, I'm 40 years old now. So I had them when I was like in my early 20s. Like I was a child raising children. And I've done a lot of bad things, not bad things, but non-conscious parenting to my kids. And I'm more aware of it now, but there was definitely there's work to be done, right? And I feel really bad about that, you know, because I don't want my kids to have to like have work to do, right? But this chapter in the book that I was just reading was this woman, basically this doctor. She was just saying that no matter how hard we try, our children will experience some kind of trauma based off of the experience that we give them as parents. Now, again, like sometimes it's dramatic trauma, sexual abuse, physical abuse, but sometimes it's just not giving them what they want and them having a traumatic experience from that. That's not the fault of the parents per se, but it's definitely something that kid still has to unpack. And in a way, that's kind of a gift to that child as they get older to really start to do work on themselves. Because one of the things I love, the quotes I heard recently, is that when shit's all going great and things are roses and everything smells great, you're living within the work that you've done, but you're not really doing any work. It's when shit gets sideways and things go crazy and your life kind of falls apart that you have to physically pull yourself up by your proverbial bootstraps or whatever that is for you and find a reason to continue on and find a reason to get past the sadness. That's when the true work fucking happens. And that's when that good work happens, right? If you're willing to do the work.
Yeah. I remember, I can't remember, there was a test that was done. Not that I am for animal testing in any way, putting that out there. But there was this test that was done on rats.
Okay.
And there were three different groups. Mm-hmm. One group was fed all the time. They had more than enough all the time, right? The other group was practically starved. Like they were given like just enough, right?
Okay.
But in both of these groups, right, there were mazes. Okay. So the one who got the most food, if I'm remembering this correctly, they got through the maze effortlessly. There were no blocks. They did it on purpose. There were no blocks. They just could get to the food, not a problem, and have as much as they wanted.
Okay.
The one on the right side that was given almost no food, they made it virtually, practically impossible for them to ever almost get to it.
Wow.
Right?
Okay.
And then the one in the middle was given kind of like a middle amount of food, but they had to work to get through the maze, but after working hard, it was achievable.
Okay.
And they got it.
Mm-hmm.
The one who had it easy, basically they were overweight and dead. The ones, obviously, who didn't were practically starved. But in the middle, it's if you are given the right amount of challenge, you thrive. You have to have the challenge.
Wow.
That, like, our systems don't do well without adversity that we have to work for to get through to the other side and achieve.
Right. Wow.
So, you know, these kind of struggles along the way, you know, there's this kind of differentiation, at least for me, between the term, because we have such a reactive experience around the term trauma. Right?
Yes.
Trauma's like, and drop the mic. Like,
Right.
It is the thing that you drop in the middle of the floor and you're like, ooh, we're in trouble, right?
Right.
While when I look at the blanket experience, right? Yeah, part of that was traumatic, but part of that was a struggle. You know, part of that was a necessary struggle in order to differentiate myself and begin to self-soothe in a different way.
Right.
So, you know, sometimes it's like, I don't know, I get so overwhelmed by how careful we all have to be around the definitions and what we say and how we say it nowadays.
Right.
You know, I'm a New Englander, and I was brought up in an Irish family, and we swear a lot. Like to me, there's more about the feeling behind what something is saying, but there's also an energy. I also understand that, but I love, like, I kind of want everybody to take a breath around the terms, like, are we what we're going through right in a given moment, not to dismiss, but are we in trauma or are we being challenged and struggling? And to kind of look at that in a given moment and differentiate a tad.
Yeah. Wow.
Especially when we're being very reactive in a given moment. So.
Yep. Yep. There was a person I was listening to a couple years back, and they were saying, there's the idea of change.
Yeah.
When we're babies, right? When we're in our mom's belly, right? We're living in amniotic fluid. We're being fed through our stomach, through amniotic or through that umbilical cord. Our eyes are closed. We can't really hear much, because we're in amniotic fluid. It's the whole experience of humanity is different. And then within many hours, we're birthed through a birth canal. The amniotic fluid goes away. Our umbilical cord is cut. We're now breathing and seeing through orifices in our body that we never knew existed. And there's bright lights, and we get smacked on the ass. And then all of a sudden, we're breathing into our lungs where we didn't have to do that. Like everything changes in our most vulnerable point in our lives. We are the most vulnerable. We cannot fend for ourselves at all. But our entire world changes in a snap, right? And that is the most inspiring thing that I've ever heard, because if I'm a 41-year-old man and just like can't deal with the fact that my car just broke down and now I have to take a bus to work instead of taking my car to work, and that ends my world, when I think back to when I was just born and all of a sudden like the whole world changed and I was able to adjust, I've got nothing to fucking complain about. I'm just not wanting to step forth into my humanity. I just don't want to, right? And that's fine too, but it's a choice, and I've got to realize that it's a choice that I don't want to change. It's not that I can't change, it's I'm making a choice that I don't want to change.
Powerful point of reference. Very powerful point of
Yeah.
reference.
So, just those little gentle reminders,
Yeah, those gentle ones, exactly.
So you've talked about your coven now and how you were brought up in Wiccan practices. And so do you mind sharing that a little bit about like how this style of, not style, I shouldn't say that, how this practice of life entered into your field and why you've embraced it for so long?
Sure. So I should be careful about saying brought up, meaning I was not born into this. Okay. My family growing up was, my dad was brought up Catholic and did not want that to be a part of his children in any way. So he's basically kind of, spirits there, but let's not define it under that rule kind of thing.
Okay.
And my mom was Protestant. So we grew up basically Christian light.
I like that. Christian light.
Yeah,
Okay.
we were brought up very Christian light, meaning Jesus had nothing to do with it ever.
Okay.
Ever. There was Christmas.
Okay.
There was Easter.
Right.
But it was far more about bunnies and eggs and a tree.
And not the rising and falling of Jesus Christ.
Correct.
Yeah.
Of any of that. We did not go to church. That was not our thing. Interestingly enough, though, as a kid, I found that and my mom was a gardener, so I spent so much of my time, in just following her and seeing what she was doing and loving those plants. And I grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston, and also on Nantucket Island during the summers. So my mom was born there, and so I spent my time either in the forest in the backyard, which was right off of literally our property, forest.
Nice.
Right?
Wow.
And then the gardens, and then the ocean on an island. So this was my life. I don't know if it's just because I'm a Pisces, or I had a spirit bend from day one.
Okay.
I, of my own accord, would, I kind of explored going to church every once in a while, and I did it mainly at, say, the Congregational Church, which is pretty much very Christian light in certain ways. And then as a kid, because I was a singer, I was big into musical theater. I was a performer for many years and all that stuff. So I grew up in Sharon, Massachusetts, which is a predominantly Jewish population.
Okay.
And this was a time really when men were still only allowed to be the rabbis.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And there was this fantastic woman in Sharon, and she basically, for all intents and purposes, she was the, quote, cantor, which she was allowed to get away with, right? Okay. But in reality, she was the rabbi.
Right.
Really.
Right.
For all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
But they were also very flexible and open and working out of the box, which was lovely. And they had a choir. And she got a hold of me, and she went, people don't have to be Jewish to be a part of this choir. And so, great. So I started singing with them, and I didn't know Hebrew, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was a practically transcendent experience eventually for me.
Right.
And what I was coming to terms with, and I remember almost crying in the middle of somebody's bar mitzvah because I had this spiritual breakthrough, like standing there singing somebody like something intense at the moment. But all of a sudden I went, it's all the same. It's all the same. It's just different filters.
Yeah.
It's just different people's filters. And all of a sudden, I felt myself a part of everything all at once in the given moment. And I'm trying not to sob in the middle of like somebody's bat mitzvah. Which
Keep it together.
Like,
keep it together, Danica.
Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, that type of thing. But then, so I got that hit.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I went to college, and I went to the Boston Conservatory of Music, so I had my musical theater background, and in the green room, there was this tiny little this tiny little piece of paper going, there's a Wiccan witchcraft study group. And I looked at that and I went, what is that? And I did a little bit of research and I went, huh. And it was almost as if a very old memory just got triggered. It was as if going, you remember this, right? Something in my body, in my being, everything went, okay. And I went, all right, here we go. And it was also, I had started reading tarot in high school.
Okay.
Right? So about 4 years before. And there was this magnificent man who played piano in my musical theater class. And we were going together to do an audition in New York. And he started talking to me and he said, you read tarot? Yeah. He goes, you have this bend for, the plant world and spiritual. And he went, okay, cut it out. Are you a witch? And I paused for a moment and I went, I don't know. Am I?
Yeah.
And he went, oh, I didn't mean and from then it took off. There was this group of college kids exploring this, and you put theater people in a room and boy, they'll explore anything in a given moment. Right. And so you're taking, to me, theater is sacred ritual. That is exactly what theater is. You go from people running around a bonfire in Paleolithic times to telling stories to theater. I mean, this is the transition. This is where that goes, right? And you are in sacred space, and the people who are acting are literally channeling. Like, people don't come to terms with that fact.
Wow.
You are channeling an actual entity that has been created that you are the body for.
I've never heard it put like that
Yeah.
before. It's beautiful.
That was one of my things that I was like, okay, when people have trouble turning it off when they walk out, it's because nobody's been trained shamanically or energetically to give that entity a home.
Right.
To be able to have it go, I'm done. You're actually not me. Thank you, because those entities can't live without a host. So you have to be able to separate.
Right, yeah.
Which is the realm of the shamanic spiritual practitioner in different ways. And so theater people are never taught that.
Yeah.
And that's important.
That
That's
is
really important.
Thinking about just from that idea you just planted in my head, just think about how many of the troubled actors and actresses that have passed away because of like Heath Ledger pops into brain.
Exactly.
Right?
He's one of the that top thing that you think about.
Yeah.
I had a friend a while back. I still what am I saying? I have a friend who has been in theater for many years.
Yeah.
And she was doing she was playing a role in the national tour of Dear Evan Hansen, and it was a tough role. It's a role where she ends up grieving and crying a lot throughout the entire thing. And she had said to me, this is rolling into my daily life. I'm having trouble putting this down.
Right, yeah.
At the end of the day. And we talked a bit about some shamanic techniques about, how you invoke a spirit like that and how you devoke, how
Yeah.
you bring in an honor and then create the place in your dressing room that is the altar and the space for them to go when you're done,
Right.
type
Just
of
like you
thing.
take off the costume, you take off the personality, you
You
put that personality on the hanger, and you be
exactly,
over there.
and you leave it over there. But
Wow.
the thing is people forget that it is an entity of its own. The more
Right.
you create in that direction, the more it has its own set of consciousness in an energetic world.
Right.
So there is honoring and respect and all of those things, and making sure it doesn't feed off of you in the long run. So it's pretty fascinating. So with the theater world kind of gave me a bit of an in
Okay.
into this because the gentleman who was the piano player ended up becoming connecting with the woman who became my high priestess and connecting me to those who are in specific covens and things like that. So it kind of when I say that it's something that I've always been. I know this. I was that kid looking for I ran out into the woods when I was upset. I would see and feel things in the woods when I was upset. All of these things, and I had no person, place, or denomination of current anything
Okay.
that held space for it until I found the tiny little piece of paper on the green room board. And then all of a sudden my life took a whole heavy turn, and it's been there ever since.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. You've mentioned shamanism and the practice of Wicca a couple times, and from just what you've been kind of explaining to me about the Wicca practice, it sounds very similar to shamanism in ways, surface level maybe.
It can. So this is how and everybody can look at it in whatever way. For me, shamanism has been explored, experienced in multiple cultures. In almost every culture that has ever existed, shamanism is there.
Okay.
Right? So shamanism is not inherent to a specific belief
Gotcha. Okay.
or a way of being. Shamanism is a technique.
Gotcha.
Shamanism,
Okay.
so, we have to be very careful about the concept of cultural appropriation, right? You don't take somebody's specific ritual to somebody's specific culture
Right.
and off you go running, right?
Yes.
But drumming at a specific beat and specific rate alters consciousness like this,
Yes.
right? That's for everybody
Okay.
and
Gotcha.
anybody
Gotcha.
under any circumstance, right? And there are certain kind of themes that we have seen throughout different cultures that are pretty common in different ways that kind of show a certain through line and an underlying way of working in shamanism,
Okay.
right? So, shamanism tends to be about you being able to go into altered space in order to be able to talk to energetic and communicate with energetic beings in order to bring information back for you, your connection to this world, and your community.
Okay.
That can be in any
That's beautiful.
spiritual or religious belief you
Okay.
want. So, in
yeah.
my opinion, you could be a shamanic Catholic. Have fun.
Yeah. Right. Okay. I got you.
Have fun.
Yeah.
Do what you want, right? And a lot in witchcraft and Wicca and in different ways, even with the history, and the history is its own animal with that kind of stuff. The technique is used in Wicca and witchcraft. When we do what's called drawing down the moon, or what we do when we are aspecting the god or goddess, in Wicca and witchcraft, there's a lot of, say, guided meditation in different ways or meditative aspects that can get you into those worlds. Not all covens use the rhythmic piece that gets you into that space really easily. Okay? So that drumming or rattling or moving or clicking or whatever it is that hits that place that actually triggers the brain to go into theta wave state. Not all groups use that.
Okay.
So, but there is the concept of hitting altered states and altered worlds and talking with energetic beings and connecting in that way. So it does roll into it. You definitely do not have to be Wiccan to do that.
Right,
So
yeah.
there that is.
Interesting. Yeah, I've been working with a shaman in Monroe for about a year now, and getting to the point now of doing guided spiritual journeys. And yeah, so I mean, what you're saying resonates a lot with me. You know,
Yeah.
it's I'm not a practicing shaman at this point in time. It might be something I work towards as far as like the rituals go. But the woman I'm working with is a shaman, and but the practices that she has, it to your point, it does seem like it carries over into anything. It doesn't necessarily like have to be succinct to being a quote unquote shaman or shaman,
Yeah.
like type practice. So
Yeah, you get even in, and you see the crossovers
Yeah.
between shamanism and Wicca, because obviously Wicca is a created thing. It is a very created thing from really not that long ago.
right,
Really.
Yeah.
It's like we can sit there and go, yeah, there are some things that are pretty ancient that kind of, but Wicca as we know it hasn't been that long.
but a few
around.
100 years probably.
No, not even.
Okay.
Not even. Not
Was
even.
it? Do you think Wicca was brought about after the Salem witch hunts and all that stuff that happened?
Well, that's kind of, if we go back to like Gerald Gardner, who basically, and believe me, there's a lot of debate around all of this too.
Okay,
This
all right.
is kind of 101 in different ways, and
Okay.
I understand you can look at it in different ways. Gerald Gardner was pretty much kind of the person who brought and stole and incorporated and a whole bunch of 90 no and brought stuff from England to here.
Okay.
Okay. And it really wasn't that long ago.
Okay.
Okay. So the techniques are ancient, right? How the religious bit of it is expressed is a good solid hodgepodge.
Okay. So
Which
it's like these practices have been kind of packaged together into something different
Yep.
than okay. All right.
Yep. Absolutely. And believe me, there are those who are like, witchcraft and all that stuff has been around in the States so before he even got here. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Not as Wicca. Wicca was defined pretty much by Gerald Gardner in
Gotcha.
that way. So,
Gotcha.
there's.
Yeah, it's like saying that religion has been around far before Christianity deemed it religion.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
Same thing.
Right on. So what are some of the practices that you or the rituals that you practice on a regular basis for your Wiccan practices, for your witch practices, things like that?
So, and I'm sure people do this in multiple ways. I, every morning, have a moment, no matter what, to energetically create a circle around myself. And I tap into and ask for and honor the presence of the directions of north, south, east, and west. And that would be, earth, air, fire, and water. Right? Since I am made up of that. And to me, those elements are the bridge between the energetics and physical reality.
Okay.
And we are that bridge as well. So I am honoring that which is energetic and physical. I ask and honor I honor them and ask for the support in my day and for the reminder of that deep connection to me.
Okay.
In that moment, there is also goddess and God that is there for me. And believe me, I'm as polytheistic as the next person. So that goddess may be, Bridget on that day.
Okay.
Or God may be Cernunnos on that day. And it may be, I'm just putting those out there because people can have patron deities that they work very specifically with. And they're all aspects of goddess and God.
Right.
And goddess and God are aspects of the great one, whatever you call that
Totally.
to be,
Yeah.
however that is. So there is the energetic sphere or the circle in which, which is in Wiccan's work. Okay. And there is always an invoking of earth, air, fire, and water. And there is an invoking of the goddess and God. And for me, there is an invoking of above and below, because I also have that shamanic aspect for me. And the helping ancestors of the land and that type of thing. So I start and end my day with that. Okay?
Yeah.
I also love leading the Sabbats. I only moved here last April.
Right. Yeah.
And what's wonderful is I already seem to have like a group of women that are getting together who are going, can you do this for us all the time? That type of thing,
Yeah.
which is just wonderful and fun and magnificent, but it also allows me to step into the role of high priestess that is what I have and that is what I am at this point, especially 30 years in,
Yeah.
right? So I create ritual and facilitate ritual for others for the Sabbats. So that's every almost like month and a half.
Wow.
We're
Yeah.
hitting something,
Wow.
right? So it helps me stay in touch with the bigger processes of what's happening all around us and how that's reflected in my daily life. If we, now that we have just passed Samhain and we're moving between Samhain and Yule, we're in the quiet time, the colder time. We're going inward. So how is that happening for me? What am I doing? So it's this feeling of I'm never alone. There's never that feeling of really ever being alone because I'm a part of the bigger picture. So there are the Sabbath rituals that happen as well, the Espat rituals, which I do for new moon and full moon as well. I personally, in my practice, I'm not a big spell worker.
Okay.
It's not really my thing. It's just never, if that working with energetics in order to manifest a specific reality. Fine. That's fine how you want to do it. For me, most of the spell work that I've ever really done is about me being able to hold space for me as the things around me are changing, adjusting, and shifting.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm not that person who goes, I have a court date. I'm going to do a spell to make sure that court date goes well.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay.
That's not me.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I'm going to do the best that I can in the way that I know how to prep for, say, what the fictional court date is. Right? What I am going to do this is not about me influencing an outcome in that way. Right? There's a certain, I go back to the tests with the rats. That I'm going to do the best that I can with whatever happens in that court date. That's about the spell work that I do for myself to hold myself in grace and preparation for what is coming.
Right.
And my ability to be flexible and open and present with whatever happens. To me, if we think we know what we want, sure, there's a certain aspect of that. But there's a whole aspect of we actually really don't know what we want.
Right.
Or things are coming that are going to make you step out of your box in ways that you're not used to.
Right.
So there's that balance for me when it comes to spell work.
Yeah.
I'm very super picky and super choosy about when I do it. So so that's it's not a huge part of my practice.
Okay. I can appreciate that. So being a Reiki practitioner, there's ways that I could potentially seemingly influence decisions, right? Sending specific energies to things and things like that. And that's I think to your point, that negates the human experience. I love Ram Dass said a while back when he was still alive and still able to, before his stroke, he was saying that he was trying to find his divinity, but was negating his humanity. And once he found his humanity, he found his divinity. And so, like, if we just feel like you said, if we just set spells to our court dates, to our, things like that, to influence that, then we're negating a potential lesson that we as a human being can learn from the difficulty that the potential negative outcome from that court case could bring us. But from that growth, there could be so much more that happens from just saying, okay, you're not guilty now. Now, okay, so you are guilty. Here's your punishment. Now, what are you going to learn from this? And I think that as a human, like, we need that. We need that. It's like we were talking about trauma earlier. We need trauma in our lives to show us how hard we need to try sometimes, right? To not just walk into a room and everybody smile at you and everything's great. To walk into a room and feel awkward sometimes and be like, oh, well, here we go. Here's some anxiety. Here's some depression. How am I going to get past this stuff?
Yeah.
You know,
And
I'll send Reiki to my studio, right? So if I'm going to teach a class later, I'll send Reiki and be like, hey, Reiki, just be there waiting for me. If anybody wants to observe it, that's great. It's there for me. It's going to make me feel warm and happy, but it's not going to solve my problems. It's just it's readying the container for me to walk into.
and that's what one of the things that I love most about Wicca.
Mm.
The down, dark, dirty bullshit is sacred.
I love you. So I highlighted that when you sent that to me.
The level I am not about ascending.
Hmm.
I came here. I in this lifetime went human.
Hmm.
And that means all of the shit that goes with it.
Right.
And it is not about rising above it. For me, it's about diving straight in. Because there are going to be days where it sucks.
Yeah.
And that is sacred. And
Yeah.
you're not supposed to avoid that. And then there are days where you're going to feel like you're flying. And that's lovely too. But, you know, the moon is as important to us as the sun is. The crap is as great as the joy. So to me, a lot of the times, like, how many books on witchcraft, spellcraft crap do you see in whatever bookstore you're in?
Right.
And so much of what you're seeing is you're creating energy to get what you want. I'm like, missing the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're missing the entire point here. Well then, and I get a lot of this. It's like, well then, you know, where do we put our energy if not towards what we want? It's like, yeah. You want to go in that direction, but you also have to realize that your spellcraft is not about just going, this is the outcome I want and this is what I will get.
Right.
Because that will never always work.
Right.
You'll be lucky, really lucky, if it even an eighth of the time
Right.
works in that way.
Yeah.
Right? So I think I like to be able to do my spellcraft that holds me to be prepared for whatever is coming at me.
Okay.
The good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah. I appreciate that a lot, you know, because that, you know, sometimes we can negate our own human experience by just relying on our tools. Like we were talking earlier, you know, just be out there, you know, fall on your face sometimes, learn the mistakes that you got to learn. And that's, you know, I think that deepens our practices. That deepens our understanding of who we are. Yeah. With your divination tools that you use, what are some of the practices you have for like divination tools?
So for me, my main divination tool has been tarot since I was 18.
Nice.
And I'm 51, so it's been a long road. Actually, was it 17 that I started? Also, I can't remember. So it has been a very, very, very long road.
Yeah.
And I use it in my practice, my personal practice, my professional healing practice, both ways. Because for me, tarot is not as much, it can be, but it is not as much about predictive purposes. Because then again, that's the, tell me what's coming so I can avoid it.
Exactly.
Tell me what's coming so I can prepare. Right? And as we've discovered from the last 10 minutes of our conversation, that's not me.
Yeah.
That's not like, the harder I try to control a moment, the more it sifts straight through my fingers like sand.
Don't squeeze that sand.
Yeah, it's like, I've got it, I've got that
fingers.
grain, I've got that grain of sand right here, and I'm going to do that. So, and don't get me wrong, sometimes in your tarot practice, you're like, I want to know, and out the cards come, really. Yeah. But in all reality, for me, I do a daily draw. There isn't a day that I don't work with tarot.
Okay.
And a lot of it tends to be with, here is the general energy of today, say, what do I need to work with in order to embrace it? What do I personally need to work with in order to let go of? You know, it's all about how I work with myself in moments that are coming at me. Okay.
Okay.
The other thing about tarot is you see an image and that rational, logical brain gets bypassed pretty quickly. And the other part of you that is emotional, intuitive responds very fast. So things that you can't normally define can come flying out of your subconscious when you put a tarot card in front of somebody.
Oh, interesting.
You
Okay.
know, so when you flip over a tarot card and, I can look at that card and go, I know what that has meant traditionally for a very long time.
Right.
But look at that card. And the person goes, I say, what do you see on that card? And they're like, an apple. Great. An apple to me means a whole different thing than the apple to the human being on the other side. So the discussion becomes, what is that apple?
Right.
To you,
Yeah.
right? I always, when people come to me for a tarot reading, the first time I go, okay, so I believe in free will and choice. I firmly believe in that. I don't believe the tarot is predestining bullshit
Okay.
at all. I believe very clearly that there are energies right here and now, from your past, from your present, and your future. If you sit still, scratch your head, and do nothing, even if you do nothing, you may change all of the energies of what's sitting here. Right? So you have the opportunity to look at what is present here at this given moment and make some choices.
There you go.
Right? What if that apple was a difficult memory? And in the tarot, we're seeing how it is actually affecting you in the here and now. And potentially where this can go.
Right.
But other cards come up to go, here is how you might be able to work with that. Do you want to? Does that resonate with you? I believe the tarot is a dialogue. I don't have the answers. And with all the years that I've actually taught tarot to other people, that's one of the things that I reinforce. You cannot take the power away from the person on the other side. Because they usually show up scared and feeling lost, and they want you to give them answers. And your job is to pitch that puppy right back into their lap and help them realize they actually already have the answers.
Right.
Because to me, a really good tarot reading is somebody on the other side going, I knew that. I know that. I knew that.
Yeah.
It's already been sitting in their head. They just seem to need the universe to go, bonk, and put its finger down on that spot
Yeah.
and go, it's exactly correct what you were thinking.
Wow.
You've got it.
Yeah.
Right? So I very much, tarot for me is not me sitting here and just talking at you.
Right.
It's a dialogue. It is a back and forth with the images in that tarot being a bridge between you and me and energy and spirit.
Yeah. Very cool.
I use it as a development healing tool in that way.
Yeah.
It is, I find it so supportive, and I also know it will kick your ass indiscriminately. It'll do that too.
Yeah.
So, and I love the history of it. I love being able to go, hey, this is a regular deck of cards at some point, and then we had a whole other set over here that talks about different, kind of overarching energies for yourself, and it just allows people to feel like ritual, very deeply connected.
Yeah.
In a way that has a very practical, hands-on, wow, divinity talks and I can respond.
Yeah.
In a super practical way.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not, and it is, for me, it's about empowerment when it comes down to it.
Nice. So in your daily practice for yourself, what kind of pull are you doing? Are you doing like a King's Cross every day, or are you doing?
I love the Celtic Cross. I have used the Celtic Cross for so long, but that tends to be when I want a very large, developed, in I go, and I'm going to sit here for a while because there's an issue and I'm doing stuff.
Right.
Right.
And that's a process. That's not just like pull a couple cards. It's like you're in it for
you're
like
in there.
An hour.
Get your cup of tea.
Yeah. Right.
Cast your circle. Put on some incense. You're there for a bit.
Yep. There you go.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
At least for me, it is. But my daily pulls, oh God, I forget the name of the lovely woman she does such a great YouTube channel called Boho Tarot.
Oh,
I
cool.
really, really like her a lot. And she's the one that I I did different versions of this for so long, but I love her practicality and how she does it. I do that daily pull of 3 cards where the center card, and it can be a combination of Oracle and Tarot,
Okay.
right, for this. And she does it this way, and I've been doing it that way, but sometimes I use just Tarot, where you pull an Oracle card that deals with the energy for the day. Here's the energy for the day.
Okay.
And then 2 tarot cards that deal with with what do I need to embrace in order to work with that energy?
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is, what do I need to let go of in order to work with that energy? Right? So I tend to do that particular reading daily.
Cool. All right.
It keeps me going, and I will in the middle of the day, because I'll be busy or whatever it is. On my lunch break, I will stop and I will look at those cards and go, where are we? Where are we with that?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, because I will initially take my intuitive notes around what that is, and at the end of the day, I will go, and how did that play out?
Right on. So it stays with you all day long.
All day.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I have an oracle card practice that in the morning I pull an oracle card, kind of with the same idea what you just talked about. What are the energies I'm working with today, and how can that manifest in my life? And not to circumvent anything or not to sidestep. It's like, okay, this is what's going to come at me today. How am I going to prepare myself best for this?
Yeah.
And it's been about it's been more regular recently, but it's been off and on for a couple of years. But the oracle practice has been really nice. And to what you're talking about with the intuitiveness side of it, there's the picture itself, then there's the definitions of whatever you read in the books. I'm still I still utilize the book quite a bit. But what I'm starting to notice now are the nuances of the picture, like today, let's say today I pulled like the corn picture, and yesterday I pulled, let's say, the hummingbird. But I noticed that in the corn picture today, there's a white butterfly, whereas in yesterday there was also a white butterfly in the background of the card that I pulled. Like, okay, well, what's the correlation between those two, right? Because I have what the book tells me, but then I also have what my intuition started to tell me. And that's been the biggest reason why I wanted to start using Oracle, using I Ching, using pendulums, things like that, is to strengthen my intuition, because it's been atrophied for pretty much my entire life. So having those intuitive moments to where I could look at something and feel instead of just read, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's getting better, it's working. Like it's such a beautiful feeling that, not that I need the confidence, but it's nice to have that reassurance of, the source, the spirit, whatever it is, like feel that working through you, through the definition and the understanding of whatever practices that you have.
Yeah. And it's funny, and I know the hypocrisy of, it's like, you're pulling a card that's kind of prepping you for what's coming. And you talked about just letting yourself go. I get it. There's like this juxtaposition of like night and day, dark and light, when opposites are in the same place.
Right.
And, I understand that pulling is kind of like this interesting way of, yes, preparing, but also it's no matter how much you prepare, stuff's going to happen out of your control, however that goes. So understanding that that's where you are. But, when I teach tarot, and it was similar to how theater happened for me. When you're learning a role or whatever it may be, you have to learn all the lines. You have to learn all the dance steps. You have to know your techniques, and you have to practice, right? And then you get on stage, and because all of those things are so embedded in you that it's like breathing or eating, you actually throw them all away. And then the intuitive moment steps in. But only knowing your foundation, do you play within the sandbox?
Oh, yeah.
Right? So that's how I've always taught tarot. And there are many people who don't do that. Tarot is just the intuitive moment and off you go, which I love and I am utterly inspired by, with people who do that so well. Right? For me, I know all the basic techniques of what does each suit represent? What do the numbers represent? What do the court cards represent? What do the major arcanas represent? How do they come together? How do they work? What is that foundation, right?
Yeah.
And all of those things are moving through my head at any given moment. Then, all of the sudden, there's the, oh, but there's the butterfly. And that will jump out at you larger than anything else. Right. And you have to go, okay, the butterfly's here. Right. And a lot of the time, the butterfly will actually reinforce the foundational basics of what you know, which is even more interesting when that all falls together at the same time.
Yeah.
You know? But it also means when you know basic techniques, you can read with a deck of cards, regular playing cards.
Okay.
If you know what you've got going.
Right, yeah.
In that aspect. So I find that I love foundation. Mm-hmm. And because I believe it holds us just like children. As a parent, you've got to give them a foundation.
Right. Yeah.
A foundation for them to be safe in, to bang around and make their mistakes and fly out of eventually. Right? But without the foundation, you're kind of, paddling.
Yeah.
Without, like, you're just paddling in a circle.
Right. It reminds me of like a jazz musician, right? You have, these theoretical jazz musicians that just don't seem like they're playing anything. It's just like, sounds like a train wreck sometimes. But it's because they know the theory, they know the instrumentation, they know everything so methodically well that they, just like you said, they can play within the boundaries. Like, I know the boundaries, I know the foundation. Now get the fuck out of my way because I'm going to do everything that I possibly can with it. And I love that, because once you have the foundation, it's yours to play with. Yeah. It's yours to discover. Like you were saying, like Wicca is something that's within the, a moderate recent past, right? That doesn't mean the practices weren't there before, but the structure of the practice is only pretty recent, And so a lot of that too, like we've been practicing divination. We've been practicing looking at the stars. We've been practicing worshiping the sun and the moon for fucking eons, right? Who knows how long? We've just now put structure to it. And so like that, having the knowledge of the basis gives us the freedom to play with the structure.
Yeah, and there's also, we all turn to, humanity has always asked for help.
Right.
It's not that, again, it's not about avoiding what's coming or thinking you're going to be ready in order to change it, but we've always asked for help. Mm-hmm. If there is an instinct to stay alive.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And we try to do all that we can in order to do that. Mm-hmm. So we've always been going, okay, I'm asking my spirit guides, or I'm looking to the stars, or I'm throwing these rocks and how they these rocks and bones and how they fall. Spirit's going to go, all right, so if you take a left, you won't die. So let's see how that goes. Yeah. So there is the very reptilian part of our brain that is going to go, get all the help you can, peeps. And that's also important, too. Yeah. So there's that fine balance.
There is. There's I don't know if you watch cartoons, but there's a adult cartoon called Rick and Morty. Just kind of dumb and funny, but it's a really scientific based cartoon. It's still like childish, but it's amusing. And there's this episode where Morty, Rick's the older guy, Morty's the younger guy. They're on this random alien world, and Morty finds this divining rod that shows you the path that you'll take. If you take this path, this is how you're going to die. And so he uses the divining rod to follow the path that shows him the girl that he's in love with, but he's too afraid to talk to. And so he's constantly just blindly now following this divining rod, no matter what melee he gets in, no matter who it hurts, even dismissing the girl that he's trying to impress so he could die with her, because the path that he's seeing when it's on her doesn't show him dying with her, but if he goes over to the right away from her, it still shows him dying with her. So it's like you're just blindly trying to find this perfect way to pass away in this idealistic kind of way, when it's like, what are you ignoring around you in that path to find your idealistic way to die? Yeah. Right? So it's just like, it kind of just reminds me of that, we could use these divination tools as the only guiding light in our entire life. Like, I'm not going to do anything unless this tarot card tells me yes or no. Or we can just use it as information that comes in, like, hey, this is the information that I got to work with. How am I going to do that? Here's the best I can do.
Yeah, live your life.
Yes.
And that's also something very powerful with any divinatory modality, in my opinion, is you got to sit there and go, do I really want to know?
Right. Yeah.
And we are a culture of I must know all the time.
Right.
And it's not just know. It's I have to prove it. Like it's a whole different level of what we think knowing is.
Right.
And in my very, very humble opinion, it's all about, and it's very reptilian, is this fear around dying.
Mm-hmm.
This fear around dying. And, I have been accused of being a nihilist.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have been accused of being a nihilist because I will say, humanity actually can't avoid dying.
Right. It's not possible.
It's not possible. And right. I was literally accused of being a nihilist.
Really? Interesting.
For that statement.
Huh.
Yeah.
Was this person a human or something like that?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because that's a part of newer a cultural kind of amassing that I've been really interested in. Definitely not bought into by any means, but the transhumanism where we're trying to either merge ourselves with some kind of artificial intelligence,
yeah.
whether uploading our consciousness, or now there's things like Oculus where we're going to be, theoretically wearing Google glasses that will help, have a information front in front of me. So if I'm looking at Danica, it says, here's Danica's Facebook profile, here's where she was born, here's where she was raised, and then all this shit. And I'm like, I don't know if I don't want that. I'm okay with dying. I'm okay with knowing that this life is going to end and I'm going to move on to something different. I don't know for a fact, but to your point, we were talking about the knowing earlier. There's this word gnosis that I love, and it's Gnosis, right?
Yeah.
That intrinsic knowing that nobody can prove, nobody can disprove. You just feel it and you know it, and that's fine. And the play off of that word that I've heard recently is knowing with a capital G. So Gnowing. So it's the knowing of the gnosis, right? I don't need to tell you how I feel and why I feel that way. I don't need to convince you. I know. And I know with a capital G that this is how I feel. And this is what I'm experiencing. And when we can have the confidence in that, then nobody can take that away from you.
Oh,
that's
agree.
all yours.
I agree completely. And the thing is it's I don't even know why this underlying piece that has kind of defined me so much of my whole life. Remember that really this gnosis has to leave room for the fact that there are billions of options of gnosis.
Ah, yes.
Billions and billions and infinite amounts of gnosis and knowing in that way. Right. So remember that really fantastically kitschy movie, The Robin Hood with Kevin Costner?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
In the 90s? Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Prince of Thieves?
Yes.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yes. With
Richard Marx had the theme song. Yeah. I love that movie. That was my jam back in the day.
Right?
Yeah.
So I have used this example, and it's been a part of my life inherently, almost as a spiritual beacon for me. Came out of that movie, good goddess. Is that scene where Morgan Freeman is in the woods with the little girl and he plays the Moor, and the little girl comes up and goes, "Did God paint you?"
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I'm probably going to butcher this, it's not exact, but the quote, but he goes, "For sure, child." And she goes, "Why?" And he goes, "Because Allah loves wondrous variety." And that has stuck with me in everything I do. Mm-hmm. Spirituality, gnosis, whatever this is, right? That we've got to leave room for the fact that everybody has a capital G.
Yeah.
And those capital G's are going to conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to leave room for that.
Yeah.
We really, 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 really do.
Yeah.
And I find that when fear steps in, and it's the basic reptilian brain going, I am going to die. Mm-hmm. And it'll go all the way from road rage.
Right.
Like when it goes all the way down, you don't have the right to cut in front of me. Why? Why not? Why
this
not?
Is my lane.
Well, because this is my lane. Why is it my lane? We're going to keep going. And the fear's going to go all the way down if you track it to, I will die.
Right.
right? So it's about, for me, I keep looking at bigger pictures of going, how many choices are we making? Because as a cultural, as a being, as a whole thing, humanity is going, I don't want to die.
Right.
And I will do everything I can, everything, in order to keep myself alive.
Right.
Now, all things that are alive tend to do that, right? Bacteria, virus, you name it, right? But there's something about what happens if we actually accept that there's life. And this is a very Wiccan thing. There is life, death, and rebirth.
Right. Yeah.
There just is.
I've the moment that I started to understand the concept of rebirth, I felt a big relief in life. One that there was this by no means by anybody else but myself, this unrealistic expectation put on me to perfect this life. Got to be perfect in this life. Got to find ascension. Got to find whatever it is, right? But the concept of rebirth gave me such confidence to know that there's unlimited times to get it right, and there's no getting it right. It's the experience,
and there's unlimited times to fuck it up,
right?
Too,
exactly.
So.
Yeah, totally. Like, I mean, there's I can only imagine how many shitty, quote unquote, like theoretical shitty lives that I've lived as a horrible person. You know, because one of the concepts of rebirth is that we've got to experience all facets of humanity, the good, the bad, and the indifferent, right? So at some point in time in a previous life, I was probably a misogynistic piece of shit. At some point in time, I was probably a very fearful feminine being of some sort. I might have been a king that may have raped and pillaged lands, right? But, you know, we have to embrace all of those parts of us to understand how bad life can be and how good life can be, and how the choice is really up to us to find what we feel is good and bad and indifferent.
Yeah, we got to be careful about the judgment piece.
Yes, right.
What we judge to be correct. Because just like in that tarot reading, if you actually scratch your head, you've changed the energetic trajectory, which means what is correct has just changed. Yeah. And in the given, just prismatic, there's millions of rights and millions of wrongs, and usually there is no right and there is no wrong. Right, there only is, and that's all we've got, right? There's a choice you made. That's it.
Yeah.
That's all you got.
That's all you got.
Right there.
Most definitely.
And off we go with that. And I think that that's what Wicca and being a part of that seasonal cycle embeds in me. And don't get me wrong, like with the shamanic work and things like that, I'm okay with dying. Don't think I'm not going to be afraid of the process.
Right, totally.
I have to say that I am pretty damn thrilled with the choice I made this lifetime around. I'm happy with the physical choice. Don't get me wrong, there are things that I could have changed, but you know what? No. And I love this planet, and I love being, physical. I'm a big fan of how joyous physicality actually is in so many ways. I'm going to be sad to let this version go. I feel like I chose well this time around, and I like it, right? Yeah. However, through shamanic techniques, I know what it's like to die. For me, I've seen the process.
Right.
I've seen it. I've worked with it. I know it in different ways. Mm-hmm. So, for me, there is no such a desperation to go survive.
Right.
And that's why those big Sabbats are like, yes, we just went through Samhain. We just went through Samhain when the veils are thin and things die. Mm-hmm. It's considered a third harvest. It was the time when, as a people, we had to choose what lived or died in order to survive through the winter months.
Right.
We had to slaughter the cattle for the meat. It was a time where you heard death all around you and smelt it. And you had to make the choices. You had to walk in and choose what died at your hand.
Right, yeah.
Right? We have stepped so far away from the responsibility of that.
Right. And then it makes it easier because we don't have to see it.
We don't have to see it.
Be a part of it.
Yeah, and I have we all, for those of us who work with animals in our lives and that type of thing, I have an animal friend who's been with me for 25 years. I have a ball python.
Oh, wow.
And she, when we start working kind of energetically with what chooses us and what doesn't, and the responsibility of death, it's a very long story, so I'm not going to go into it, but how she actually came into my life was one of the most powerful, spiritual, long-standing shamanic experiences I've ever had. But when I actually came to terms with the fact that I'm going to have a snake in my life, I had to choose how to feed her.
Right. Right. Can't just give her grass.
No, I can't.
Yeah.
And that was part of why spiritually they were like, you have to get back into the rhythm of life and death.
Wow.
And so when you walk in, and because of COVID and things like that, it became harder to feed her live in certain ways. You couldn't go out and buy your rats or whatever it was.
Right, yeah.
So, and there are a lot of people I understand with snakes, you got to feed them frozen so they don't get hurt, because the rats can turn around and bite them, and then there can also be disease, all this stuff. But for the first, and I'm pretty convinced that she's as old as she is because I fed her live all the time.
Right.
Really. I mean, if as a live being, do we prefer frozen or fresh food?
Always fresh.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, totally.
Right there.
Yep.
But I had to go in and choose a live being. Yeah. I had to choose. And there was ceremony around it every time. Every time. Yeah. I was like, I cannot thank you enough for your life and your choice. For the fact that you are going to be a part of this process. Right. And that I am going to be a part of this process, this difficult process. Right? And I made sure that when I dropped that rat in, I did not look away.
Good for you.
I watched and continued to watch every time.
Right.
I had to see that rat struggle for life.
Right.
I had to know my part in it, and I also knew and saw that it was part of my snake's life as well. That you can't step away from it. It is an inherent and embedded part.
Wow.
And so my understanding of death is different now because of it. I am very, because of the shamanic work and the lesson that this lovely being that has chosen to spend so much time with me has taught me.
Yeah.
One of the most difficult and frightening lessons that humans can go through. She shows me every day.
Wow. That's a whole other perspective I never thought about with owning an animal like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's astounding.
Yeah.
It's like when we used to all have to farm.
Right.
You're part of that cycle.
Right.
It is.
Yeah, and we're not that far removed from that as being a part of life. I think maybe 2 generations. Like my grandmother was, grew up in Kentucky and was on a farm, and at the ages of between 5 and 7 would go out and grab a chicken, cut its head off, and pluck its feathers and bring it in for dinner. Whereas now that seems like such an atrocious thing that we all eat. I mean, not all, but if we're meat eaters, we eat processed foods. We eat the meats that are processed through these plants, and the trauma that these animals go through because they're not being butchered by an individual now. It's being butchered by a machine, and all this stuff that's happening to the food that we eat because we've lost contact with that process. And I'm not saying that I'm different, because I go to the grocery store and I buy prepackaged food. I'm not killing my own chickens or things like that, but I do feel that there is something to that physicality of you being a part of your process. You are physically feeding yourself. You are finding the food. You are making that food prepared for you to eat in some kind of way.
Yeah, and that things have to die in order for things to live.
Exactly.
Period.
Yep.
And humans are not above that.
Yeah.
For me, the concept that humans are above all of that misses the point.
Totally.
For me.
Oh,
For me.
I'm right there with you.
You know, in many different ways. And, you know, once again, I'm back to referring to movies. You know, it's amazing. But one of the reasons is as I fed my snake, it was always ceremony. And whenever my snake, there was, you know, she's more in the pattern of she would eat to winter and then stop and hibernate and then come out on the other end. So there was always this moment somewhere in winter where I would bring a rat back and she wouldn't eat it.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So I, you know, I'll have to grab the rat and bring the rat back to the store. However, I have also had 4 pet rats in my life. I have had 4 pet rats in my life because some of them chose me.
Okay.
I would take them out and they would look at me and go, hey, and crawl up on me, cuddle up, and just look at me and go, I'm like, oh, you're staying.
Yep, you're different. All right.
You're staying.
Yep.
I got it. And I was the kid that my mom went, you know, are you going to be a vet? Because I would bring everybody home. I've had everything from Siamese fighting fish to chinchilla to parakeets to snakes to and I'm the kid who runs around and like brings home the dogs that have been left out somewhere.
Yeah.
Or my mom said it started when I was a kid and like I called the teacher at school, called and said, you need to come get Danica. And I'm sitting on the sidewalk with a cage with a guinea pig because the kids like dropped him and broke the leg, and I cried and insisted that I take him home to like heal him.
Yeah.
And there's my mom. I'm like, we have to take him to the vet. We can't. Like I've been like this with animals my whole life because they teach me.
Right.
I can feel them, hear them, all these things in all that way, and my snake is one of. There's so many stories to tell about her, but she has been probably one of my greatest teachers of all time.
Our teachers present themselves in the strangest of ways.
In the most miraculous.
You love that.
Astounding ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, I think the last thing I really want to talk about is how herbalism kind of meshes with your practices now, and if herbalism was brought into you by the Wiccan practices that you have, or was that like whispered to you while you were developing your Wiccan practices, or was that something that you were innately drawn to beforehand?
So, the connection to the plant world has kind of always been something that I've had, right? Okay. But it was, so I've always had the plant practice and the energies, just like any of my pets, they're my friends. They've always been my friends.
Right.
In the room, outside, whatever it is. So they've kind of spiritually been a part of my life. How it rolled into herbalism was actually super practical. Not, you know, witchy or magical or wonderfully energetic in any way. It was, I was a theater performer. And in order to get health insurance in the theater world, it's virtually impossible. You have to work a certain amount of weeks professionally in the union in order to get them. And you don't just get it. You have to consistently get those weeks or you drop out of the insurance.
So you can fluctuate in and out.
All the time, right?
Annoying. Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you know, because I had this propensity for plants and things like that, I went, well, there is this thing called herbalism.
Yeah.
Right? And I went, what? This might be... And all of a sudden I started kind of studying for myself, and it became a practical way of taking care of myself and my friends when we didn't have health insurance.
Oh, there you go. Right on. Okay.
Right? And then it turned into, oh, but there's a spiritual component here too. Right. So it kind of came from this very practical place and the spiritual place and just kind of went bloop all at the same time. And especially once the shamanic piece came into my Wiccan practices, you know, if I'm doing shamanic journeying work, half the time it's a plant spirit that shows up for me,
Yeah.
you know, and I will work with them in that way. Not as much in spell work. That's not my thing. But I will do more like a very, very modified version of like a la dieta, where you meditate with the plant, where you have a tea of the plant, bathe with the plant, and you do this for a certain amount of time while doing shamanic journeying work and meditation and all this stuff in order to create a relationship.
Gotcha.
With the plant.
Right.
You know, I I appreciate very much the chemical constituents of plants, but half the time, more than half the time, let's say 80% of the time, a plant that, say, is traditionally for, I don't know, a uterine tonic, will go, actually, they're having anxiety because of the imbalance of the uterine tonic, so I need you to actually use me for an anxiety piece.
Interesting.
Which chemically you go in and you go, that's actually not what it's for. But
that's not what the plant does.
The plant goes, and we see in different shamanic cultures, those who work with plants, if a shaman has a really good relationship with one plant, that one plant can do anything.
Wow.
So I will sit in front of my little apothecary in my apartment and go and feel it and go, what is it today? What do I need today? You know, and it will change energetically. Herbs will go, you need very little of me for a very powerful energetic move. While we might be trained that you need a lot, 2 to 3 dropperfuls in order to get a chemical constituent boost, right? But if you're working with something super, 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 super physical, sure, you may need the bigger doses. But what if you're doing the energetic bits? 1 or 2 drops is all you need. So I've kind of, for me, it's a balance of both and how it has come into my world. Just from an inherent love of plant life. It started there, and then it moved into, oh, I can use this for health, and then it moved into, it's a part of my Wiccan practices and my witchcraft as well. And shamanism, it's always been a part of how you do. So it just is, over the years, I'm one of those people who, I'm not afraid to go, oh, this is what I need today. Even if it breaks the rules.
Right
I'm
on.
a big rule breaker.
Good for you.
I've always been a very, very large rule breaker. If somebody, I get that this is imbalanced, and I get that it's reactionary, but when somebody tends to look at me and go, you need to do this, I have a very visceral, you need to fuck off reaction first.
Right there with you.
That comes right there.
Yep.
But then I go, ooh, there was that reaction. Let's see where you actually need to step out of the box, where you need to bring this in. But I'm always about, if this is working in the moment and it's out of the box, as long as you're not like purposefully hurting people, go on, brother. Go on, sister.
Right. I feel you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's different modalities that work for some, don't work for others, that work in certain ways, that don't work in other ways, and it's like you said, it's unique to the practitioner and how that person's using.
Yeah. And I was taught by my my high priest way back when, and I love that, is that as a practitioner or as a Wiccan, it was me teaching tarot at the time, and I was kind of like, oh my God, I don't think I'm ready for this. I don't want to. There's so many other people who are going to be better at this than I am, and I just don't know what's going on, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, Danica, whoever walks through your door needs you. Your style. What you bring to the table. This is not about competition. It's that everybody needs unique things. And if they've walked through your door, make no mistake, it's because they need you and your gifts.
That's such a beautiful message.
And I've held on to that ever since, because everybody tells you how you're supposed to do something.
Right. Yeah. You're doing it wrong. You're not following the directions.
And it's of value if you do it this way.
Right.
And only this way. Right. And I hear my high priest's voice in my head every time that happens.
Yeah.
And I hear Morgan Freeman going, because Allah loves diversity. And between those two moments, I seem to have this guiding light that walks me down my path.
Oh my God, I love that. You know, I've always dreamed of Morgan Freeman just narrating my life, and just
I know.
if I like,
I know.
I'm gonna think about that Robin Hood moment now.
I know.
I'm gonna think about that. That is so beautiful. Yeah, I think just to wrap it up, what's the next practicing or recognized Wiccan holiday that's coming up?
Yule.
Yule. Okay.
Yule.
And what's a way that people could honor that or learn more about it? Or
Sure. So Yule is the longest night of the year.
Okay.
All right. It is the night in which the light, or the sun, SUNSON, is reborn. All right. So a really simple and powerful thing to do: watch the sunrise.
Beautiful. Okay.
After the longest night of the year. You know, if you want to be like intense and committed about it, you can definitely take the time to stay up through the night,
Okay.
you know? And in the morning, watch the sunrise,
Okay.
you know? You can do something like, it's cold. On the longest night of the year, shut off the heat. Shut off the lights.
Embrace the
dark
cold, embrace the dark
and the cold.
Yeah.
Sit there in your own home, not reading, not anything. You, sure, bundle up. Yeah, it's cold and dark without the light, gang. Be
Embrace.
uncomfy in it.
Yes.
Be uncomfy so that when you watch the sunrise, you've got gratitude.
Yeah, right. There's a guy that I've just recently been working with named Ian, fantastic human being, and he said something to me recently that resonates a lot to what you just said. We do a lot of plant medicine ceremonies together, whether it's Hape or Sananga, things like that. And the first time I had a Sananga experience, I was with him. And for those that don't know what Sananga is, it's an eye drop that you put in, and it makes your eyes burn immensely. But it clears away all of the spiritual gunk, all of the fake story that we don't live in, that's not true, and it allows you to see with clarity. And so before we went to our first session with that, he had said that he made this comment that, you know, in a lot, especially in the Western world, we don't know how to sit with intense sensations anymore, whether intense heat, intense cold, intense pain, intense joy, right? There's even intense joy that we can't sit with. And so one of his things with the reasoning behind his usage of plant medicines is to help him learn how to sit with sensation and be okay with it. And that unlocked something deep within me and made a lot of things make sense in my own personal path. And that was such a beautiful little nugget of wisdom to drop on me before he set my eyes on fire.
Ready?
Exactly. Now blink.
Hope these words get you through.
Right, exactly. So I love that. I think that's a great message, and a great way to kind of wrap things up here.
Great.
But you know, Danica, thank you so much. I've learned so much from our conversation, from the practices of Wicca, practices of tarot, herbalism. I mean, you have such a great way of making this information attainable and fun to learn, and not, it's kind of scary. Sometimes this new information can be really scary. It's overwhelming. Like, oh my God, there's all these things now I have to do. No, you don't. Remember, you're your own practitioner. You don't need your rituals to be whatever thing that you are. Right, so a lot of great just nuggets of wisdom that you've dropped on us. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely, and I'd love to have you back in the near future.
Anytime.
All right, love. We'll see you soon.
All right, bye.
Thank you so much for joining Danica and I. We'll leave a lot of notes and links in the show notes. If there's anything you want more information about, just hit it up. And please subscribe to the podcast in whichever favorite platform that you listen to. Leave comments, leave notes for us. It'll really help us out. And as always, thank you. Obeisance and love to you all. We'll see you next time.